The bisphosphonate bone drugs that are used for osteoporosis have now been found to prevent the metastasis of breast cancer in young women to the bone. Now that's really interesting.
You know, it shows you how Big Pharma is so serendipitous in what it does, and when it finds its uses for the drugs that it has. It reminds me of a drug that was used for hypertension that wound up growing hair back.
Rogaine.
and this is another example of how we know so little about the biochemistry of the body, and then find out to our glee sometimes that it does things that are real good, like this, if the study is correct.
You know, I've heard you say sometimes when we talked about the bisphosphonates that they are actually a chemotherapy.
Well, they are a form of chemotherapy because what they do is they kill the cells, okay, the osteoclast cells that eat up bone. So what we wind up with is a chemotherapy that's destroying those cells that should be eating up old bone. And so what we're doing is we're making our bones made out of old bone. But at least there's more density, there's more calcium there, more structure than if you didn't do that. And that's how they work. And of course, because they have so many side effects, I think they generally should not be used in medicine except in rare occasions.
So how do you think that this is working from, you know, helping with osteoporosis and helping young women that have probably been on chemotherapy for their breast cancer to prevent them from getting metastasis?
I have no idea. I think it's one of those things that we found out and went, wow. And if it turns out it's true, it's like extending 37%, how well people do, which means that 4 or 5 people out of 100 over a period of years will survive that wouldn't have. I mean, that's like something that's important to know.
Well, I was thinking how older women don't have as many hormones going on, you know, their estrogen and so forth.
It's low.
And then women that have breast cancer have often been on hormone-suppressing drugs.
Right, which lowers their estrogen a lot too.
So would bones that were more osteoporotic or more porous be more receptive to getting bone cancer?
I don't know. I don't think that's true. It's an interesting way to look at it. But basically what we're looking here is something that's just odd. We found as a side effect that this drug, that's used, this Zometa, is a drug that causes increased survival that we didn't expect at all. And it's something that was used anyway to try and prevent bone metastases from occurring, and of course preventing fractures, which is a big deal for people who have cancer and bone metastases. So this was serendipity at its height.
Well, this is probably why it's important to do tests, because a lot of times things don't seem rational or don't seem to make sense.
Well, that's right. You always should be doing research and following lots of different parameters, but there are thousands of parameters to follow. And when something like this happens, if you can trust the data, see, I always worry about that. When Big Pharma is doing the research, okay, and they're publishing the results, I question that a lot. And
did they do the research on this one?
Yes, indeed they did. And so what we need to do is wait and see what happens when a bigger study is done. But they're using this drug anyway, the Zometa, in patients who have breast cancer as a routine, because they do better. The breast cancer patients do better by having fewer fractures. What they're not really looking at is the natural ways of doing that. What about vitamin D and vitamin K, you know, and giving a little bit of calcium or maybe a little bit of strontium, which will help build up the osteoblast activity and make it lay down new bone, which is a good way to go. I'm not categorically opposed to drugs. I mean, I think I'm opposed to drugs when they're doing things that are not such a good thing. I mean, look at the side effects that we see with people who use these bisphosphonate drugs.
You can have necrosis of the jaw. However, they said they didn't see it in these.
Now that makes me suspicious, because the incidence of osteonecrosis of the jaw using these drugs is probably 3 to 5 or 6% in a lot of big studies. And now they come out and say that out of 1,700 people that there weren't any cases of osteonecrosis. That's just sort of a surprise. So when you look at the side effects, I mean, you're looking at ulcers that form in the esophagus, severe constipation. In fact, it's called obstipation. You can get atrial fibrillation from it. And you talk about osteonecrosis of the jaw. You get pain in your muscles and joints. It can be
Fever.
severe. Yeah, a lot of things. Skin conditions. So it's not like it's here, take this drug and everything will be fine. It's here, take this drug and we'll pray nothing goes wrong. And a lot of the time it works. It doesn't have complications.
The other thing about this drug is it's very expensive. It's
Indeed.
like $1,500 to $2,500 a shot.
Right, and you need 2 shots a year for 3 years to get the results that these people talked about. So to get a 37% lower death rate and save 4 to 5 patients out of 100 at 7 years is worth it. But still, I mean, the drug companies are gouging us because, I mean, the amount of money it would cost to produce these drugs is probably pennies, and then they're selling it for this. And I understand the business of it, but I also look at there are a lot of people who can't afford this too. So it's going to be very interesting, Vicki, to see what happens over time, to see if these studies can be reproduced and show that they have an effect, because the chemotherapy treatments we use very often are quite difficult to take. They're very expensive and they don't work that well. So if it meant using a drug like this, which has relatively few side effects compared to chemotherapies,
yeah.
I think we're in business. So we should keep an open mind, even though we're in the nutritional side of medicine, because sometimes medicines work.